Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where his nails were, and where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And all together. Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." The good news of Christ.
Buongiorno. Good to see you all today here, and welcome to this fifth Sunday of Easter. Today, we're going to continue our trimester teaching theme, which is going to run right from the beginning of May to the end of August, called Reconnecting and Regathering. And for most of the part, I won't use the screen, just so our Zoomers, hello Zoomers, so you can see me and not, and I think embodiment is really important. Just big welcome to my son, Christian, who's here from Calgary. And I see our life has gone to the dogs, as you can see. But it's been so wonderful. He grew up in this church in Vancouver, so it's good to have you back, son.
I'm sorry, my sheep, they wanted to get prayer.
They do?
I brought my sheep.
Oh, we'll bless them. We believe in blessing the beasts and the children. So we're going to talk about reconnecting and regathering. And our text that we've just read from is from this strange period between Easter and Pentecost, where the disciples are in this state of recovery together from a corporate trauma of the crucifixion. Like us, they'd been scattered everywhere, not by a pandemic, but by the corporate trauma of the crucifixion. And they were beginning to regather, like us, but it wasn't easy. Even though Jesus had risen, it just wasn't the same anymore. They used to hang out with campfires by the Sea of Galilee and just have hours of walking and talking, and then he'd feed the 5,000 and blow them away with some great miracle and then teach. But now he was pretty incognito, wasn't he? He was just, in the language of Julian of Norwich, he would show up through a wall, be there for a bit, and then he'd be gone. And so they were disoriented. They had no idea what was going on. And it was a liminal place, an in-between place where they felt like their whole life was in limbo. Know that word, Marina? Marina I guess there was a Mexican holiday this past week called Cinco de Mayo. And they like to do this limbo game, and Marina was playing this game with some of her Mexican friends at school, and you were pretty sore for a few days after, right? She's still sore. So you know what it is, right? They make the little pole or bar lower and lower, and you have to try to get under it without, going on all fours. And it was, can you imagine your whole life being like that? That's kind of what liminal space is. It's like you're in this in-between place and you want to get through and get on with it, but it's like you're stuck. And so we're in that same place, I think. As a church, as a society, as a culture, as a world, we're in that. The pandemic, we're coming out of it, but things aren't the same as they were before. And we don't know what the new reality will be. And there's rumors that Jesus is still working. There's rumors that God might still be alive and in control. But it's just not the same. So we're starting to regather. So good to see you, Veronica. Did I tell you guys? I forgot to tell you when I showed all my pictures of the sun run. She phoned me up that week and congratulated me. But then I found out that she always goes on the sun run herself. It's amazing. Couldn't go this year because of COVID and all that, but it's next year maybe we'll all go together as a church. You can go as fast as you want. We may not wait for you till the finish line, but you can go as fast as you want. So, regathering and reconnecting, community is a lot easier said than done, isn't it? Someone once said that human beings are like porcupines who are huddling together on a cold winter's night to get warm. But we're so pokey because of all of our brokenness and personality differences. We poke each other, so we end up going out and freezing alone in the dark rather than being poked so much. And I think that's quite descriptive of the cost of true community, right? As Bonhoeffer said, community can be this elusive ideal or idol because love is hard. And one of the biggest poking barriers to coming together, I think, shows up in the story of Thomas today. It's not obvious, it's subtle, but I think it's there. Now, I think Thomas gets a really bad rap. I've been just feeling that all week. I think he really gets a bad rap. And we're actually a lot harder on him than Jesus was. We call him Doubting Thomas. But there's a whole lot more going on in this story than just the fact that this guy is a cynic or a skeptic. Remember, our story here that we've just read, Nathan read, occurs 1 week after the resurrection or on Easter Sunday. And you'll recall from our text last week that on the evening of that day, of Resurrection Day, the disciples were gathered and Jesus showed up, and by an extraordinary means comes through the wall, shows them, he says, I'm not a ghost. They thought he was a ghost. So he said, no, touch me, touch my scars. He doesn't say scars, but he says, put your hand here where the nails were. And then they still didn't believe, so he said, give me something to eat. And then, you know what happened? That fish that he ate went through the wall with him. I mean, you'd think it would kind of go and slide down when he went through the wall, but no, it went out. So there's this amazing thing happening where the spiritual world and the physical world, through the resurrection, come together. Heaven and earth are coming together. Isn't that amazing? That reality, it's the presence of the future was coming through his appearances. But Thomas wasn't there. And we don't know why. Maybe it was just coincidence. He's nicknamed the twin, so we're not sure who his twin was or why he was nicknamed. It could have been totally innocent. Maybe his family had an event going, or maybe there was business. As you all know, we can't always be at everything, right? However, he was one of the 12, okay? It's been a traumatic weekend, and there's been rumors by these crazy women that Jesus, his body is missing, and they think he's alive. So with all of that, with Thomas missing from that event, there seems to be something more going on than meets the eye. Why would he miss this? Why would he not be there? How many know there are some things you miss and some things, no matter what, you just don't miss? Some things with my kids, my grandkids, with my spouse, with Kathleen, you just don't miss. You know, you don't call in sick, you crawl in sick, that we used to say. You just don't miss. There's no excuse, right? There's some things you miss. There's some things you miss because you have to miss, right? Thomas shouldn't miss this. There's something going on here. Now, what do we know about him? He doesn't appear often in the Gospels. He was with Jesus from the beginning, one of the 12 that was called. He seems to be a bit of a melancholy guy, doesn't he? You know, an artistic, melancholy person who's pretty, and I think he's one of those guys. How many have met this kind of person who say, expect the worst, and then you'll never be disappointed? You'll be pleasantly surprised when something's better. Wade, do I see that hand? Good, yes. And I think Thomas was that kind of guy. Like, expect the worst, then if it's not the worst, then you're pleasantly surprised. Remember when Jesus said he was going to go back from the Jordan to Judea to raise Lazarus from the dead in a territory where there was a price on his head, right? They were trying to kill him in this area of Judea. And so Jesus says, no, we're going to go back. And Thomas says, okay, well, let's all go and die with you. Remember that? And then that other time where Jesus was talking about he's preparing a place for everyone that's large enough. I go to prepare a place where there's room for everyone. And then he says to the disciples, and you know the place I'm going, and you know the way to where I'm going. And have you ever been in a classroom or some kind of setting where it's a teaching setting and the teacher says something and everybody's going, yeah, and you know nobody has a clue what the teacher means. And you want to ask, but you don't want to be thought of as stupid by everybody else? That's Thomas. Thomas says, Lord, we don't even know where you're going. How can we know the way? Like, he just breaks the ice. He says, can I just be the voice of everybody else in this room who's too chicken to ask? He just asks. And out of that question became the most memorable statement from Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, the destination is the journey. You end up where you started. It's like the clock, the small and large hands of a clock are 12 o'clock. And they start to move, and for 12 hours, they're separated from each other, right? And 12 hours later, they end up at the same place. And that's our journey. We're going to end up where we started. We're going home, right? I am the way. The destination is the way. The way is the destination. It's a journey. It's a relationship. It's a community. It's a connection, right? So we come to this place where Thomas missed church. And it seems to be a lot more emotional, alive than the fact that he happened to be missing. There's too much at stake. Remember, they've all been traumatized. The one that they had invested their hopes in, their dreams, their careers, their future. They'd given up everything to follow this incredibly charismatic person who spoke with such authority. Ooh, getting excited. And their family members have said, are you sure you're crazy? Are you sure this is unwise? You're giving up your job? You're giving up your career to follow this person? You're giving up responsibilities? They said, no, he's the one. We're convinced there's nobody that's ever spoken like this and acted like this. And they laid it all down. They laid it all on the line to follow him. Now to watch him betrayed by his closest friends, brutally executed in humiliating fashion before a mocking crowd, hanging bloodied and naked on a cross. You see, friends, the heart, your heart, is not just, when the Bible talks about your heart, it's not talking about your physical organ, although it's affected by the true heart that the Bible refers to. Your heart is that center of your being, that organ that was made to hope. It was made to trust. And when those hopes are crushed, the heart is broken. It's the condition that the Bible calls the brokenhearted. What happens when your heart is broken? It loses the capacity to trust. Who can ever know the layers of grief, loss, frustration that Thomas was feeling, the bitter disappointment over a wasted 3.5 years? How humiliating as he thought of his family and his friends who had cautioned him on the wisdom of leaving everything behind to invest himself in this questionable Messiah figure, who hadn't even received an official endorsement from the religious leaders of the time, who called them to love their enemies, choose the way of nonviolence. And now in his head, as he's wandering the streets of Jerusalem at night, he hears 1,000, "I told you so! I told you so!" He heard it in his head. And what made it worse was his own disappointment with himself. When Jesus needed him the most, he fled like a coward. He fled in sheer panic. And with the rest of the disciples, they were hiding out as fugitives. And the only ones who stayed with Jesus were these unbelievably courageous women who stayed with him right to the end. His mother, Mary Magdalene, Joanna. And I'm sure the shame and disappointment over his own failure from meeting, I think that kept him from church. How many know shame keeps you from church? When you've blown it, when you've failed, when you feel like you're just FML. Should I say it? Come on, Gordie, say it. When you feel like FML, what do you feel like going to church? Do you feel like that when you have shame? Do you feel like that when you can't even look people in the eye? And you know they failed too. You can't even look at each other. I think there's some of that coming out of COVID. I think you know what COVID has done is it's uncovered mental illness. It's uncovered our issues. There's more family conflict and relational conflict now than there's ever been. And it's not that it wasn't there before. It's not that those porcupine quills weren't there. COVID's just uncovered them. There was a fake blanket that was covering our quills. Now it's uncovered and we're just poking the hell out of each other. It's happening in families. I'm seeing it all the time. So he didn't go to church. He stayed home. We become aware of our own pokiness. So we stay less, because we don't want to hurt other people. There's at least a little bit of integrity there. I don't want to hurt you with my porcupine quills. So when your heart's been broken, it means hope has been crushed. And what is damaged is the organ of your being that was designed to give you the capacity to trust, to believe, and to surrender yourself to other people and to God. To believe that God is good. And that God is for you, and that all will be well in the end. That's smashed, that's broken. It's like a broken bone in your body. And so the alternative is fear, which gives place to distrust in all of our relationships. And so we become inwardly hostile, if not outwardly, withholding ourselves and even violent because we believe the universe is unfriendly. So we have to defend ourselves and protect ourselves. And that, Thomas was on the dividing line. He was like, I think he was right at that point. Like, which way will I go? And so when someone tells you the good news in that kind of circumstance, it actually feels like bad news, doesn't it? That's what happens with a broken heart. When he hears the wild rumor that Christ might be risen, he says, I can't take this. My heart can't handle another heartbreak. I can't take another disappointment. Those of us who've had our hearts broken, we say, I can't afford to have it broken again. It hurts too much. I can't afford to hope again. I'm going to protect myself from being hurt ever again. So we guard our hearts against hope. We settle for self-protection. We settle for cynicism, or even worse, anger and bitterness, and we begin to freeze alone in the darkness. And to make the matters worse, the disciples of Jesus then tell him that Jesus showed up at church. And he chose to do so. The nerve! How could he do that? He shows up when I'm not there. Doesn't he know how I feel? He doesn't love me. He doesn't care. He knew I wasn't going to be there. How could he do that? So he makes his stand defiantly. There's no way that I'm ever going to come close to trusting again, hoping again, believing again, unless I see the scars of the nails in his hands, put my finger in those nail marks, and put my hand in his side. N.T. Wright says the wound in the side was so big you could fit your hand into it. What do you feel here? Is Thomas's doubt, is it intellectual? Or is it here? What are you feeling? Then, to add even more salt in his wounds, he waited. 1 day passes, nothing. 2 days, nothing. 3, 4, 5 days. Have you ever had to wait? You were waiting for God to help you? Why does he take so long? Don't we feel like Job? It's like, what happens when these delays occur? We feel like God doesn't care. It's like, kill me, God. Job was so defiant. He said, kill me or deliver me. But don't be indifferent. Don't be indifferent. Don't be apathetic to my pain. Why does it seem that God takes his sweet time sometimes? The painful thing about delays is that it feels like God doesn't care, and so we rage at God. And so Thomas steels his heart, and he makes this stand. It's an emotional thing. There's no way that I'm going to let myself get my heart set up to have my heart broken again unless. And here's what I love about Thomas. He says, unless. He left a small crack of his heart open. He left a little crack. And how do we know this? How do we know that he did? Well, first of all, by what he said, of course, but 1 week later, where's Thomas? He crawled in sick, not physically sick. If you're physically sick, stay home. But if you're emotionally, spiritually sick, I didn't come to call the healthy. I came to call the sick and to heal the sick. Sick people need a doctor, not the healthy. If you're sick, come. If you're broken, come. If you failed, come. There's grace here. How many went to a church who grew up in a church called the Guilt Center? You know, they're still around. I hear people telling me stories of sermons they hear, and I go, what? You know, you felt bad about yourself when you came in, and you feel 10 times as bad when you leave. There's grace. There's grace. So 1 week later, it happens again. They're in this house. And this time, Thomas is there. It must have been so hard for him to get there, to overcome all of these barriers of guilt and shame, the feeling of gathering in community, and he feels the porcupine quills as he starts to get close. He feels his own porcupine quills, and there's something about gathering. Scripture is clear. There's something about gathering together, as hard as it is, as much as we like to stay on Zoom in our pajamas. And that's no slight to you guys. I know there's different circumstances. But I'm telling you, pastors across the country have been detecting this sense of laziness that some of us have about being willing to get out of bed and just come back together again. There's a cost even to coming together. It's uncomfortable. It's Wade's first song in the worship set. I just felt this is where we are. We're in this sense of disorientation. But it's okay. God comes to us and he uncovers things that we don't see any other way. And they come together and there's this discomfort, and all of a sudden Jesus is there in the midst of the porcupines. And the first thing he says, what does he say? What's the first thing he offers? Peace be unto you. Peace be unto you. Peace be unto you. Which simply means, friends, it's all good. Yeah, it's like, who was saying that earlier? Was it Sandra? Somebody was talking about the storm. Yeah, that we're actually that storm. But Jesus stands in the midst. It says, peace to the wind and the waves, right? So that's the first. I love that tradition in church life. A lot of churches do this. I'd like to adopt this more ourselves, where we grant each other the peace. I think it's such a gift. Grant peace, peace of Christ to you. What a gift in these traumatic times, these tumultuous times. And then my favorite part, he turns to Thomas after he blesses them all with peace. Hey guys, I know it's been 8 days, but it's still good. I'm still here. All shall be well. And he turns to Thomas. I love this. And he says, Thomas, and what does he do? He shows him his scars. I want to be a community where you can show your scars, not hide them. Because when you hide your scars, listen to me, when you hide your scars, they become weapons. We end up hurting each other with the hurt we've been hurt with. But when you're open about your scars, when you're open about your pain, and I want us to be a community where you can be open about your scars and open about your pain and open about your failures, and there's enough grace on tap. And I want to be a place where where our Thomases can come in and ask these questions and voice their doubts and say, I don't get this. That's okay. The wrestle is so important. So it's not a fake faith. So it's not shallow and trite and full of slogans and jargons. I totally understood what Sandra was saying when she talked about we want to say Jesus is the answer. Like the little guy that, in Sunday school when the teacher said, who invented the electric light bulb? And the little boy says, I know, it's Jesus again, right? And we get like that. We get like that. And we lack the reality of a faith that's vibrant and full of honesty and reality. God is truth. So your truth, the reason why we ask all of us to be silent and to be aware of our hearts and what we're feeling is that's where God is. He's not where you're not. He's not where you think you should be. God is where you are. But we often aren't where we are. We're off. Woo, woo, woo. Right? You got to be present to yourself before God, you can be present to God. St. Augustine said that 1,800 years ago. Sorry, 1,600. So Thomas, look at my scars. Reach out, touch me. So there's embodiment here, right? Physical touch. How much physical touch? We've lacked that in COVID. Why touch? God, affection is so important for encountering God, knowing God. Touch me. And then he says, put your hand in the scar in my side. Stop doubting and believe. I don't hear a rebuke in those words. I know it sounds like a rebuke, but we don't see Jesus' tone. But I don't hear a rebuke there. You know what I hear? I hear Jesus saying to Thomas, there's only one of two choices here. One is you can default and go the way of fear, cynicism, hostility, depending on yourself instead of God. And you can live the rest of your life with a big brick wall around your heart. But I see what Jesus was saying was an invitation. It was simply an invitation. He was saying to him tenderly, he was giving him an opportunity to trust again, to be a believer. To believe. This happened in my nervous breakdown when I'd made an attempt to kill myself once and failed. Thank God I wasn't very good at it. And I was tempted to do it again. I felt I was a waste of space. I felt I was a waste of Kathleen's time, of my kids' time. They deserved a better dad, better husband. I was done. I was so mentally, physically, spiritually broken. I couldn't trust God. I believed that I deserved hell, if not just to be dead in the ground. And when worship songs went on, I felt worse. Worship songs made me feel worse. Until one day, we ended up in the Okanagan, near Kelowna, And Kathleen found this little gospel bookstore, and she found this little music track. And I can't quite remember what the name of the album was, but she put on a song. And I was just a vegetable. I just couldn't function as a human being. And she put on this song, and the words went like this. Had a bit of a gravelly Kenny Rogers voice, so I'm in good shape for this. I am a wounded soldier, but I will not leave the fight, because the great physician is healing me. So I'm standing in the battle, in the power of his light, because his mighty power is real in me. Oh, I am loved, I am accepted by the Savior of my soul. I am loved, I am accepted, and my wounds will be made whole. And I heard these words. Gordie, you're a mess. Welcome to the human race. Be a believer. Just be a believer. Just be a believer. Believe that I'm good. Believe that I love you. Believe that I'm for you. Believe that I am more you than you are yourself. So it was a journey. It was a journey back. Journey of healing. I think that's what happened to Thomas. Be a believer. Blessed are those who don't see and believe. I don't think Jesus was comparing Thomas to people who were more worthy because they believed that they didn't see. I think all that Jesus was doing was he was referring to us. Saying, Thomas, I met you where you are. I'm going to meet them where they are. Many of them are going to trust me without having experienced what you did. And there's a special blessing for them. It wasn't a comparison thing. And how did Thomas respond? How does he respond? Almost done here. He says something that nobody else in the Gospels ever says. The only person that came close to saying it was John the Beloved, who wrote this book. At the beginning of the book, he said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He declares Jesus Christ is God, becoming human flesh. But nobody in all of the Gospels ever says it until this moment with Thomas. And I don't think it was about Thomas realizing that Jesus was just God in that sense. But I think Thomas was realizing that he had ideas of God that were all of a sudden falling apart. Because you know what the greatest idolatry is worshiping our ideas of God instead of God himself. We have all of these ideas of God. And we have these ideas of community, and we idealize them, and we end up shooting each other because people don't live up to our ideals of community. Henry Nouwen says the most important character of a community is forgiveness. And the most important thing we have to forgive each other of is not being God. Matt, I forgive you for not being God. In other words, what I'm saying is we can't be God to each other. We have to forgive each other. We have to give each other slack and grace. And it doesn't mean we enable, unhealthy, toxic behavior and hurtful behavior. We don't. We confront it in love. But the greatest call is we're called to be a community of grace, and we welcome people into this place without having to be God. You don't have to be God. Hello? Good morning. Getting excited? Yeah. So I want to close with this. I want to invite us into some silence for a moment, and I want all of us just to come into a moment of silence where we take maybe 3 or 4 deep breaths, and when you exhale through your mouth if you can, and I want you to pay attention, and if you can just throw that slide up there, Sherry, to this question. Over the past 3 years, where has your heart been broken? Where have you lost your capacity to trust? It may not be in every area of your life, but where has trust been broken? And I just want you to be with that. Now, for some of you, there might be something that's farther in the past that's kind of looming over you, and that's okay. If you feel that's where you want to go, that's okay. But I think as a leadership team, we've really felt the last 3 years, there's just some stuff that the Lord really wants to work with. So I'd like you to just take a moment just to be with that, and just remember what I said earlier. Jesus is not where you're not. He is where you are. Okay? So let Jesus be with you in that place, like he was with Thomas. And let him show you his scars.